Welcome one and all to the Reserves Innovation Working Group here on the 23rd of November 2023. We've got a really good lineup today coming from Will and Matt from Mafic and FC Labs respectively, and they're going to talk to us a little bit about upskilling a low skill workforce, and also looking at safeguarding a workforce and trying to create that better working environment with the various things in the technical world. Very pleased to have them on board today. Thank them very much for stepping in at the last moment as we couldn't quite deliver the underground living session that we were hoping to do this month. So a quick reminder to those who don't know who we are. Who are the Reserves Innovation Working Group? Well, actually, the title is slightly misleading in the fact that we're open to all reserve and regulars across all the armed services. Okay, so whether you're Navy, RAF, Army, or whether you're in the MOD, then you are more than welcome to be a part of our team. Your knowledge and experience is what we want to share and is our underlying theme. And we focus on that innovations, experience, knowledge and exposure that the civvy world can bring to us into the armed forces and stop us from buying kit which is vastly overpriced, but stuff that the construction industry has got proven record in using. Might be not just the construction industry, might be more. It's flat structure, so we want your brains, not your pips, stripes or crowns. And we meet once a month for updates, sharing and discussions. There's a few ongoing projects which are run by us all, and I'm sure we will hear a few bits about them later. So without further ado, what I want to do is to bring Will into the conversation and introduce the first topic, the first 20-minute, on why should we upskill a low-skill workforce. Will, over to you.
Ian, thank you very much. Very kind to host me, and good afternoon, everybody. My name's Will, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mafic, a construction technology company. And we've developed a range of different products. One of them is a wearable device, which attaches onto the back of a hard hat. I'm going to share my screen. I do have some slides, and I've got a bit of a story to tell. Bear with me. Ian, can you see that?
Yep, I can see that. Good.
Perfect. Okay, so we've developed a wearable device that attaches onto the back of a hard hat, and from the movement of somebody's head, we can understand what activity is being performed. And we reward that individual for going the extra mile. And so like a Strava or a Fitbit model, we encourage that person to do all those positive behaviors and reward them for it. So most construction trades get paid an hourly rate. However, from my experience, this only encourages people to turn up to work and nothing more. And so our product rewards individuals for going the extra mile. So we're trying to fix this reimbursement, this contracting structure that we have with tradespeople in order to align their objectives, that of management and shareholders. So the activity recognition works because every activity you perform, your head creates a unique movement signature. Your head is about 10% of your body weight. And so at the moment I'm talking and waving my hands a little bit, and that motion is transmitted into my head and is unique to talking. You're listening, I can't see too many at the moment, but I imagine sort of your head's fairly stationary, the occasional nod or shake. And again, that's indicative of listening. Now, translating that into a construction site, you can quite quickly see how using a nail gun, a circular saw, welding machine grinder, we can start to categorize people's days into distinct activity chunks. We can then aggregate it away from the personal level to a point where we can measure productivity and progress. Perhaps more importantly, we can accurately and consistently reward individuals for performance, motivating everyone to put in a better day. Now, my background is not deep technology. I'm an engineer by trade. I spent my entire career up to 5 years ago working overseas in shipyards in China, Japan, Korea, Nigeria, and a bunch of other countries. So I revel in heavy industries and the challenges of managing large workforces. And my most recent role was working for Samsung Heavy Industries in Korea and Nigeria. Now, in addition to being successful in electronics, Samsung is the world's third largest commercial shipbuilder. Numbers 1 and 2 are Daewoo and Hyundai. Now, in the yard in Korea, we had about 50,000 people coming in through the gates every day, and setting these people up for a safe, productive day's work was extremely difficult. The tools we had available to us were spreadsheets, experience, and a bit of gut instinct. Now, this is the point where I had my light bulb moment. I wanted to create some technology which we could use to improve the efficiency and productivity, as well as the safety of these industrial workplaces. So I brought my family back to the UK to start a new chapter in our lives, and hopefully a new chapter in the construction industry. So today I'd like to talk to you about the value of upskilling a low-skill workforce, and I want to tell two stories. The first is an incident which happened to me during the construction of one of our major capital projects I was working on in Nigeria. The second story is told using data that we've collected at Mafic, and I'll argue through both stories that the value of having a skilled workforce is disproportionately high compared to the cost of creating that workforce, even in what the government, or the UK government, calls a low-skill industry such as construction. So my first story happened in 2018. I was working for Samsung on an FPSO project for Nigeria, and this is the FPSO project. It's effectively a floating oil refinery anchored offshore in one place for 20 years. It produces oil directly from the well, processes it on the deck, stores it in the hull, and then sells it to trading tankers that come up behind to offload. Now, I was the transportation and installation manager for this unit, working for Samsung. So I was responsible for getting this from Korea to Nigeria, around the Cape of Good Hope, into Nigeria, where we would integrate some modules. So we had about 20,000 tons of modules, sort of 8 modules that need to be lifted onto this. And then from Lagos, then get it offshore and hook it up offshore over the field. So this particular FPSO at the time, and I still think it is now, is the world's largest FPSO, and it's currently producing 20% of Nigeria's oil. So it is and it was a high-profile project, and it was massive on every scale. Think HS2, but in private hands, and really think about the private hands there. It took 7 years to build and about 60 million man hours, and the total cost of the entire project, including all the subsea, was about 15 billion. The stakes were set pretty high. Now, the events I'm going to describe happened on the last leg of the journey, from the integration yard in Lagos Harbour to the offshore site. And Lagos Harbour is rather a unique harbour. There's multiple creeks and lagoons, which make the tidal flow incredibly complex. These large bodies of water empty very quickly through narrow bottlenecks, creating, as I said, truly unique conditions. We actually found that at some states of the tide, at different depths in the water column, the flow could be actually in completely opposite directions. Now, because the FPSO is anchored in one place for 20 years, and unlike a tanker, it doesn't have any propulsion. So this means it has to be maneuvered by a number of tugs, which either have to attach to it with a tow line or go bow on and push. Now, all of these tugs have to be controlled by a single person, a towmaster, who's normally placed on board the FPSO. All of these circumstances were known challenges. And so as a project, we spent a huge amount of time and money, resource, simulating this maneuver, which in the end would only take about 90 minutes to complete. So for the entire operation, we had 5 harbour tugs and 2 spare standing by. We had 3 ocean-going tugs and a further 2 spare standing by a little way offshore. We had 2 security vessels, 2 private security vessels, and we also had the Nigerian Navy standing by at a 6-mile radius. So all in all, we had 16 vessels. And there were also media vessels and a few other vessels about, but for the purpose of the operation, there were 16 involved. Now, everything was going well, and we were just about out of the harbour when the Dyneema section of the tow line on the starboard tug parted. We use Dyneema since it's incredibly strong and lightweight, meaning the deck crews can handle it in circumstances where minutes can often mean a difference. A wire rope often needs some sort of crane or a winch to be handled at all. We anticipated this eventuality, perhaps not quite at such a critical moment, and we had a second line rigged up on the bow, ready to go. This was passed to the tug and connected. However, not more than a minute or two after we'd taken up the tension on this new line, then the opposite side, the port tow line, also failed. We were still inside the harbour at this point and heading quickly for the edge of the channel. Now, on board the FPSO, I had access to our tug management system, which gave me the real-time position of every single vessel involved in the operation, as well as their vector. It would also predict the position of the FPSO 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes into the future. And looking at the TMS, in 20 minutes' time, the FPSO was firmly on dry land. It wasn't aground outside the channel, it was actually on dry land. So I was on the bow with Phil, the foreman from the offshore hookup team, and we had a critical decision to make. We could either use another Dyneema line, which was lightweight, easy to pass to the tug and connect, or we could use the ocean-going tow line, which was a 76 mil, sort of that kind of size wire rope. Very difficult to handle, but unlikely to break. It would take about 20 minutes for the Osaragu, the tug that we wanted to pass this line to connect and take up the tension, compared to probably about 10 minutes using the lightweight rope. We opted for the wire rope, despite the TMS telling us we would be aground in 20 minutes. The next 15 minutes would decide if a $4.5 billion FPSO was going to become a permanent feature of Lagos Harbour or not. Now, the first step to connect a tow line to a waiting tug is to pass a heaving line from the deck of the FPSO to the tug. And this is normally a 12mm soft rope with a monkey's fist in the end. The monkey's fist is a weighted knot, which ensures the end of the rope goes the furthest. I'm sure many of you can relate to this, but throwing a rope is one of those things which you think will be 100% trivial, right up until the moment when you actually let go and you realise you've completely underestimated this seemingly simple task. So one of our deck crew stepped up, coiled the rope in two hands, performed a couple of muscle memory rotations, and sent the line sailing over the aft deck to the waiting tug, 30 meters away, straight into the hands of the deck crew. Over the next 10 minutes, the deck crews on both the tug and the FPSO worked furiously to release pennants, open and secure shackles, release the line, and ready for the tug to take up tension. And after 15 minutes, tension was taken up on the line and we started to regain control of the FPSO. However, unfortunately, this was not the end, but only the start of a really long day for everybody. With 5 tugs connected, we left the harbour and straight into an unexpected current running from east to west across the mouth of the entrance, something we had not considered since we were 60 minutes later than scheduled. Within 20 minutes of leaving the harbour, we had broken every single tow line on the FPSO, apart from the wire rope that was attached to the Osaragu, and we were drifting through the anchorage towards the beach. Now, the Osaragu was or is an 80-ton tug, which is a large harbour tug, but it's nothing compared to the ocean-going tugs, which are 250 tons. So in the context of things, when it's the only thing connected to this behemoth, it's not particularly big. The master manoeuvred up current of us and paid out as much line as he could to dampen the shock loads, but also provide more directional stability. The problem with a very short tow line are the shock loads and a very high risk of breaking the line. Otherwise, likewise, if the tow line is not being pulled over the back of the tug, there's a significant risk that you can girt the tug, and that's effectively the tow line capsizes the tug, it pulls it over. Now, we were purely in the hands of the master of the Osaragu. I shut myself in the tow control room and fixed my attention on the positioning system, texting updates to the Samsung CEO. Slowly, I watched the vector of the FPSO from heading towards the beach, slowing down and reversing and heading out towards open ocean. We were making progress and my tunnel vision was starting to clear. This is when I got a call from the Osaragu master. The port engine is overheating and they have to reduce power to 50%. My heart sank, back on the text message to the boss in Korea. The chief engineer from the Osaragu worked for the next 30 minutes, jury rigging, flexible pipes and cooling to the engine. And 20 minutes later, the master came back on the radio informing us that they were ready to increase power back up to 100%. Now, I know this sounds like something out of Star Trek, but hand on heart, this was exactly how it went down. I was standing on the helideck and I could hear the breaking waves about 200 meters away. A further 20 minutes passed and I could start to see we were slowly edging centimeter by centimeter towards deeper water and safety. By about 1800 that evening, we were about 50 miles to the south of Lagos under a 2-tug wire rope tow, assessing the damage. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, and the only damage was superficial, mainly caused by placing all of the tugs on one side of the FPSO and pushing. Their collective horsepower had actually managed to dent the side shell of the FPSO. So lessons learnt sessions were put on hold since we were 24 hours away of rolling into a 21-day installation campaign where we would work day and night to secure the FPSO in her final position. Now, since then, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the events surrounding Lagos Harbour. What went wrong? What could we do differently next time? And the overwhelming message for me was just how dependent we were on the skill level of a few individuals who, before the operation, were not considered key. The rigger who stepped up and made that perfect throw, the deck crew on board the Osaragi who heaved the rope across and secured it in the shark's jaws and connected it to their primary tow line in record time. And then the chief engineer in the engine room on board the Osaragi who nursed his engines through the 6-hour ordeal. Now, these 3 individual groups of people came together and did what they've been trained to do. Their consistent, unwavering ability to perform at the highest level under extreme pressure made the difference between catastrophe and a great learning experience. Now, the second story I want to tell you, fortunately for me, is not quite as dramatic as my Lagos experiences, but again demonstrates how reliant construction projects are on non-key individuals and the value high-performing people can bring to the table. I'll use a portion of our Mafic dataset, which comes from the dry lining industry and the commercial and residential sectors here in the UK. Before we jump in, I'll give you a bit of a background into actually what the data looks like. So the data on screen here all comes from the movement of the head, and it's for a single device over 1 day. At the bottom, we have activity, and this is the number of minutes spent active, walking, and stationary in as a percentage. On top of this, we can also count the number of times tools are used as well as specific actions. So we use a combination of these metrics to measure the forward progression of a project. The second element in the middle there is floor level, and this is solely calculated using the air pressure and the differential air pressure throughout the construction project. And the last element is what we call chapters, and this is a higher level summary of somebody's day. We can tell if somebody is on a work face without actually understanding where they are. And this is done by understanding when they are working and when they take a walk of more than 10 meters. And once they've taken this walk, they have left the work face. If they continue to work, then we say they've started a new work face. And if they don't, then we say they're off work face. So all of this data is anonymous and aggregated to protect privacy. We use a combination of these metrics to reward individuals, and the positive behavior we're looking to encourage ranges from outright performance to most improved to most consistent, and can be varied by the supervisor. So if you have a milestone at the end of the week, for example, and Fridays are notoriously slow days, introduce double points where the guys can earn extra cash and watch your productivity climb. Now, the second chart I want to talk through is likely one of our most important discoveries and drives the economics behind increasing our customers' labour cost while also delivering a positive ROI for them. Now, each bar represents one person over the course of about 3 months, and there's probably about 60,000 man-hours behind this chart. So on the y-axis, we've got productivity and low performers on the left-hand side and high performers on the right. The difference between the upper quartile and the lower quartile is a factor of 3 to 4. The variation in hourly rate for these people is plus or minus 15%. So let me say that in a slightly different way. We have an output difference of 200% or plus or minus 200%, but the wages only vary by 15%. Now, the economics of this arrangement mean that you can spend a lot of money training or motivating individuals before your investment goes negative. The name of the game for Mavic is to move the people from the left-hand side up the curve towards the middle or the right-hand side. I want to look after the top performers because I don't want them to leave, but it's the middle and bottom performers which are most interesting to me. Doubling their output is probably feasible. Doubling the top guy's output is maybe a bridge too far. So for some of our clients with more than 50 people, we do give the option of viewing aggregated data. And this can be used to firstly identify opportunities for improvement, such as this one here. So this is two types of shift pattern. The time of day is along the x-axis, whilst productivity along the y. We performed an A/B test. The first group had a single 30-minute break at 12 o'clock. Yeah, is it 12 o'clock, which is the grey line? Whilst the second had 2 times 30-minute breaks, one at 10 o'clock and one at 2 o'clock. We found that slightly more work was done in 9 hours and 2 breaks compared to 9.5 hours and a single break. It's that fatigue curve and that degradation in performance towards the end of the day, which had a huge impact on productivity. And so we found there was an 8% difference in these two shift patterns. So give the guys more time off and your labor cost was reduced by 8%. Now, I'm sure many of you have sat in town hall meetings or organization team building events and heard somebody say, or maybe you even said this yourself, you guys are the most important asset this organization has. I've heard this, and unfortunately, this is often where the conversation stops. As I hope I've just demonstrated, we now have the technology to start recognizing people properly. After Lagos, I sent a letter to the owners of the Osaragu addressed to the master and the crew and explained their role and they played in the entire operation and the difference they made. I understand that letter is now framed on the bridge of the Osaragu, and everybody who works on board that vessel understands where it came from and why it's there. I hope I've demonstrated through my own experience and also through the data that investing in people the right way yields far better returns than perhaps things like Bitcoin or Berkshire Hathaway. Not only do we have the right tools to help people perform, but I think it's a significant step forward to make a difference to employee engagement and job satisfaction. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I believe now is the time for any questions if you have any.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Will. Wow, what a story. Blimey. I don't think we came close to crashing a Crossrail at any point in time, but yeah, £15 billion worth of investment in the balance.
Yeah, I had a twitch in my eyebrow for about a year after that project, and I mean, it's gone now, but it was.
I'm not surprised. It's interesting technology wise. So I'm presuming it's very much like the old the Fitbit type, Strava type, Garmin app thing that you wear on your wrist that you're placing on the hard hat type world.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same principle, but it's much more sophisticated. And the choice of the position. So there's a whole. So if you're measuring the position of your wrist, there's a whole load of other information in there which confuses and muddies the water. So, for example, when your Fitbit thinks you're taking 1,000 steps and you're actually on your bike, so your head is very difficult to isolate the movement of your head when you're doing another activity. So your head is the best place. If you want to recognize activity by kinematics, the head is the best place.
Gotcha.
For Fitbit, yeah, it's convenient to put it on your wrist, but we get a much more detailed set of information that comes out of from the movement of the head.
And it's something that you can guarantee everybody on a construction site is wearing, is a hard hat. simple as that. Or in the military parlance, either a hard hat or it's going to be a Virtus helmet. So is that something that presses against the skin in the hard hat, or is it just purely mounted on the hard hat?
It's logging the 6 degrees of freedom and the pressure. So it doesn't actually have to touch it. It sits on the backside. And the way we made it was that this was a voluntary system, because we didn't want to mandate this on anybody, and we wanted to build that the benefits into the system so people can choose to use it, and rather than having this use the carrot rather than the stick.
So that's sort of my next question. If anybody else has got questions, obviously I sometimes monopolize the questions here, but what was the kind of incentives that you gave for this information? What was, you're gathering information potentially about people's productivity. That's never going to go down well for quite a lot of our construction world, especially on things like infrastructure or working on somewhere like the railways. As soon as you start doing that, the unions get upset, and you're never going to get anywhere with any sort of technology. So how did you get the buy-in on that?
So yeah, it is a challenge, and the first bit is communication. So actually, we positioned ourselves. Our branding was separate from the organization, the client, and all that side of things. And we were sort of trying to move ourselves towards actually a quasi union ourselves, where we have the interests of the individual themselves, and what's good for them is good for us. So we try to separate ourselves as much as possible and say, look, if it's not good for you, sorry, Mr. Tradesperson, then fine, don't have to wear it. As far as incentives go, it was cash, and so we have we go and get a pot of cash from the client, and normally these pots of cash are sitting in these contracts anyway, performance milestones and what have you. But all of these projects are so far behind, they just barely plug gaps in the contractor's own organization and never ever get actually down to the tradespeople themselves. So the conversations we were having were really interesting with the likes of HS2 to say, look, actually we could potentially get a whole load of money from DFT here and skip out the entire supply chain and put it into the pockets of the guys on the ground where it has the maximum bang for its buck. So we set that about 15 to 20% of somebody's salary, so they could get 4 to 6K a year extra, and we would pay them once a week. So it was straight into the bank account when they requested it through the app. And the payback on that is really interesting. The payback. So the workforce is so if somebody puts in a good day and say they put 20%, they do 20% more weld, 20% more pieces of weld. They've reduced the cost of that welding, but assuming that weld is on a critical path, they've also reduced the schedule, and the cost of that welding is enjoyed by the subcontractor or whoever pays that salary directly, but the schedule on the critical path is enjoyed by everybody, and everybody's preliminaries, like in the entire supply chain, is reduced by 20%. So you've got this double dip of gain, and people are very, like, the smaller subcontractors, obviously they're hand to mouth, especially at the moment. They are very focused on money, but actually schedule is where the real dollars are, or the real pound signs are. And so that was a more sort of the bigger picture kind of thing, but there's a huge advantage there. And it's I mean, all of the projects I've worked on, they get later because they're late, or they get more expensive because they're late. Things don't actually have to happen just because they're late. It's just the pound size rack up just because days are ticking by.
And I suppose one of the big ones of those is the fact that somebody's borrowed that money in the first place, and they expect something in return for the money that they've paid out. And if they can't recoup that and repay the loan, well, you carry on paying the interest plus the penalties for a late payment. So, it can run into places, things like Crossrail can run into billions if you arrive several years late.
Yep.
So yeah, pretty big. So thanks very much for that, Will. What we're going to do now is we're going to head over to Matt, and Matt's going to talk to us about safeguarding that workforce and creating better working environments and making technology invisible. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks so much.
Oh,
yeah, I was clicking away and it wasn't changing. Yeah, thanks ever so much. And I haven't got a story anywhere near as mind-blowing as that from Will, actually. So a tough act to follow, definitely. I would try and link what Will was just talking about to what I'm about to talk about, to be honest, but it would probably just complicate matters, to be perfectly frank. So I'm just going to jump straight in. We'd end up being here for an hour rather than 20 minutes, but I'll get straight to it. My name is Matthew Norbury, founder and CEO of FC Labs. We are a wearable neurotech company, so not dissimilar to Will. We are working with the head, but in our case, we're building simple, affordable tools to help you understand what's going on actually in your brain. Wearable technology, many of us will be familiar with it, some of us somewhat addicted to it in many ways, and the data it gives us, but you can't deny that it has absolutely transformed human health, well-being and performance, and continues to do so. There are over 250 million smartwatches and fitness trackers sold this year. Those numbers are expected to continue to increase at a rate of 10% year on year. But it's all from the neck down. It's only measuring our physical fitness. We talk about some of these devices measure sleep and stress, but they're using heart rate. They're using heart rate variability. They're not looking at the brain. And you could argue we're ignoring our brain fitness. It's the state of brain health and mental well-being and cognitive ability that makes us fit for the demands of life and work. It's absolutely fundamental to our health, happiness and performance, and particularly as we age. Brain health and healthy aging is a huge topic these days, particularly in terms of retaining skills in the workforce. But we're not paying much attention to brain fitness at all, nowhere near as much as we do our physical. Why? The answer is pretty simple, really, is that it's incredibly difficult to measure. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So at the moment, other than things like self-assessment and self-reporting, those surveys you might do at work, asking you how you're feeling, are you happy, there isn't really any way to measure it. There's sort of psychometric tests, but again, they're time consuming. Nobody particularly enjoys doing them. So there is no way to gain empirical data on brain fitness at the moment. That's the problem we're solving until now. I suppose I should say that's the segue into the next slide. So we believe that brain fitness should come first. That's why we're building the simple, affordable tools to help you understand what's going on in your brain. And our first product, our first application of this technology is Cortec. I do happen to have one here, so I'll bring it up. So in fact, I can't see I don't know if you can see that.
We can see that, yeah.
I can't see what you're seeing, but that's Cortec on the side, and our sensors are in here. We are actually looking at what's going on in the brain. Ian, you mentioned before a Fitbit. Some people have called us like a Fitbit for the brain, but the technology is very, very similar. We're using near infrared light positioned on the forehead, anywhere on the forehead, and we're looking at brain activity. So Cortec is it's an AI powered. It isn't everything these days, but it's an AI powered platform that uses that brain activity data to give employers in high risk sectors like construction, hence the hard hat, engineering, manufacturing, the power to measure and manage brain fitness for the first time, to unlock better health, well-being, performance and productivity. So our brain fitness, it fluctuates all the time for all sorts of reasons. Factors like lack of sleep, stress and anxiety, mental and physical fatigue, heat and cold, nutrition and hydration, air quality, countless others all have an impact. And in the workplace, lower brain fitness or impaired brain fitness means that mistakes are made, accidents happen, productivity and quality decline, costs increase, people get ill, burnout, long-term conditions develop. So it's a huge, huge problem. The OECD estimates that impaired brain fitness is costing the global economy as much as $8.5 trillion a year in lost productivity. The lion's share of that is caused by presenteeism. Not sure if you're familiar with the term, but essentially it's when people have turned up to work but aren't doing anything, essentially. They're present but not productive, whether that's to do with being tired or stressed or fatigued or ill, just not firing on all cylinders, that they're present but they're not productive. And research shows, this is UK statistics, all industry. So in the UK, on average, 35 working days for every employee, 35 working days are lost due to presenteeism. So if you put all of that at the start of the year, it's like you come back to work from your Christmas holidays, but nobody's actually doing anything until the middle of February. I mean, I just find it a completely mind-blowing statistic, actually, that's average. We tend, as a business now, we tend not to talk about human error. It used to be something that was very much front and center for us. In fact, our value proposition used to be we enable businesses to track and predict the risk of human error. We've moved away slightly from that for a number of reasons. It's quite a misused and misleading term in some ways. It implies blame on the individual, and it's never ever that simple. Human error as a factor, human factors as a factor, we just tend not to talk about it as much, but it is still very much part of what we can help businesses to do. Research shows that human error is a factor in over 90% of workplace incidents, 380 million workplace injuries, for example, almost all of them caused to some degree by human error. And CoreTech provides simple, actionable data on what we call brain fitness, but all of those underlying causes. We provide that data to both workers and the management. As I mentioned before, we use near-infrared light to measure activity in the brain itself, and our AI, our algorithms, track and predict those fluctuations, whatever the underlying cause. We're not diagnostic at the moment. We can identify certain underlying trends, but on our product development roadmap is to become more diagnostic. So we can not just identify when risk of low or impaired brain fitness is high, but also identify or try to diagnose, give some indication of what the underlying cause might be, whether it's sleep, fatigue, illness, alcohol or drugs. That's absolutely on the roadmap. It's just about data. So we provide insights to both the individual and the worker. This enables targeted action or intervention. It supports decision making, allowing allowing management to address areas of concern before they become critical. So we often talk about making the invisible visible. I know in the title of this particular segment, we're talking about making things invisible. And we absolutely do, in terms of how our technology has been designed. It's small, it's lightweight, it's designed to be worn and forgotten, essentially. But in terms of the value that we provide, it's absolutely about making something which is currently invisible visible for the first time. So our hardware can be attached to any headgear, hard hat, bump caps, headsets, ear defenders, and so on, or it can be worn on its own. It's also been designed for the most challenging, hazardous environments. The current prototypes aren't ATEX certified, but the ones that we start trials with next year will be. We've also, and hence some of you may have noticed the Fitbit on the visual there. We've also identified the ability to just use heart rate and heart rate variability to provide an insight into brain fitness. This came from the data science work, the algorithm development work we were doing about a year ago. And a data scientist we were working with at the time said to me, So even if all we've got is heart rate, we can still continue to provide insights. Essentially, we're designing the algorithm to adapt to interruptions to signal. This caused some, it's an opportunity, but also some challenges, because whilst we can provide insights into brain fitness using wrist-worn devices, our USP is looking at the brain. So from a business point of view, we are currently running trials using data from Fitbits and Apple Watches and Garmin's and Oura Rings, actually. But we don't see it as a long-term product, largely because there isn't a sufficient USP. The amount of work we would need to do to establish why we're different, which we are, but it's a very, very busy marketplace. Every, like, Apple Watch tells you it can give you insights into stress. It can, in a way. It's not looking at the brain, but it's a busy marketplace. So although we can provide insights using data just from these wrist-worn devices, we don't want to, I think, long term. But there is a lot of interest in it. So it's one of those where our focus is very much on looking at the brain, but we have this opportunity to generate some early revenue, to trial how the data is being used. Actually, it's incredibly useful. We can do some quite large scale trials because we can use devices which are readily available. So looking at those at the moment with people like BP and Galliford Try, where they're just assessing really how the data is going to be used. That's the, I suppose, the big step. That this is new technology, new data. Nobody really has used it before, so that's something we're constantly keen to talk to people about. Is, look, we can do something that nobody's done before. We can give you data you've not had before. There's a lot of interest in that, but we need to work, and are working with a whole host of people in a whole host of industries to understand exactly how this new data can provide the benefits. Really, those benefits are all about keeping workers safe and well, but this I suspect is slightly different in the military world, but certainly in the commercial world, we have literally heard safety doesn't sell. So keeping workers safe and well, whilst it's the right thing to do, isn't always enough. So we've done a lot of work recently on establishing and proving that link between keeping workers safe and well and delivering bottom line improvements in productivity, quality, even sustainability, and ultimately profitability. Sectors like construction in particular, margins are like mind-blowingly low, actually, and productivity is an issue. Presenteeism, I mentioned before, is particularly acute in construction. So by helping to take the guesswork out of what's going on in people's brains, we're able to help businesses keep their workers safe and well, but most importantly to them, if not to the workers themselves, we can actually improve their business performance, productivity, quality, and ultimately profitability to whatever the underlying cause is. Competition-wise, we may be used to include Mafic on this, actually, Will, a wee bit. It's I think where we are sitting in terms of actually looking at the brain, there aren't many, to be honest, and the ones that I've listed on here, so SmartCap and Kernel in particular, they're much more expensive. They're quite cumbersome and bulky. You need a team of neuroscientists to work them. There isn't anything which is simple, low cost, operationally practical, and just very deliberately provides that simple, actionable insight into what's going on in the brain. It is a big problem though, so you've got businesses and organizations trying to address it in all sorts of different ways. So giving people free subscriptions to the Calm or Headspace app, for example, is part of, in some ways, what we're competing with, but we're really the only one which provides that empirical data on something which at the moment is completely invisible. We describe ourselves as safety as a service. It's a subscription-based model. You get the hardware, you get access to the software, you get one-to-one support for every individual. You get separate advice and support, analysis, consultancy really for the business itself as well. In the future, we really, this is in some ways is our kind of holy grail. If we can get to the point where we can demonstrate to the insurance sector that we can reduce risk to the extent that they're willing to reduce insurance premiums, then that will cover the cost of Cortec and make buying it a no-brainer decision, if you'll excuse the pun. The team, we're kind of eclectic actually, so we're really a team of 8 now. Engineers, neuroscientists, psychologists. I feel slightly the odd one out to an extent. I'm the founder and CEO, but I'm from a marketing background. I used to run a marketing agency. Some have said actually it's possibly why we're doing something that nobody else has done before, because I had no preconceptions about what was possible or not. And some would say that what we're doing, if you'd asked them 3 years ago, probably would have said it was impossible. But we've proven that it's not. And that's partly because I refused to take no for an answer, or was too stupid to understand why it would be impossible. It's not been easy, I'll put it that way. So we're at prototype stage, tested and validated in the lab. This is with the headset device, and also in controlled environments like BP's drilling simulator, for example, which was a very interesting couple of weeks down there. We've got larger scale trials of that headset device starting in April. So if anybody's interested in getting involved in those, I would love to chat. And after some Innovate UK funded work using the wrist-worn devices, we are actually moving into commercial trials with those just now. So they go live in January. So again, if anybody's interested in trialing those, would love to chat. We're working with businesses like Chivas, Pernod Ricard, BP, GlaxoSmithKline, Galliford Try, MMB, and so on. Lots of others. We do see Cortec as just the beginning, actually. When people ask me or the team about our vision, we've got a big vision. We're very ambitious just for this first technology, for Cortec itself. But we very much want to build a business which uses this technology to change and improve people's lives in all sorts of ways. And I have a sense, I might be wrong, but would love to hear your feedback on this, but that in terms of how we might work with the defence, military, it's possibly longer term, looking at how we could use this technology to help you. I have no military experience, I'm afraid, and very little understanding of exactly how you might use technology like this. So any feedback, any thoughts on that would be great. And there's a fantastic organisation called DASA, which is kind of the Innovate UK arm for the military, who we have spoken to and absolutely love what we're doing. And really what we need to move to the next step is somebody within the military world to kind of champion us and say, actually, I'd be interested to explore how this might work. And then DASA has apparently got pots of money to throw at it, so I would love to chat to anybody who's interested in that too. That's me. Thanks very much. Hopefully, no stories about crashing $4 billion ships into beaches, but yeah, hopefully that was interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Matt. So I've got a couple of questions, and obviously I shall keep an eye out for other people putting their hands up. So the technology, as it's on the side of the helmet, does that have any sort of connections going through that needs to touch the skin or the head, or?
Yeah, so our sensors, so the emitters and the sensors, they're only tiny. I don't know if you can just see them on the inside of the.
Oh yeah.
There,
gotcha.
So they're absolutely tiny. So this is a JSP hat. So we've worked with them. So obviously their concern is that attaching our tech to their helmets interferes with the protection they provide. So
yeah,
we've done some tests with them, and they're comfortable with both the unit on the side, which at the minute uses the accessory slot, but the next version of the prototype just attaches using some bands. But then it does need to attach to that sensor strip, which goes on the forehead. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean that's the helmet systems that we have. I've got a similar sort of, I suppose, support structure within inside there anyway. So I wouldn't see a problem on that. And there are sort of, I suppose, two areas that we would be looking at something like that. One is when we're actually doing construction work as such, because we have people who do build railways, maintain railways. We've got people who do drilling rigs for fuel or for water. We've got teams that are doing all sorts of things within power stations and the like. So they will be wearing a standard construction hard hat for some of their work, depending on the threat level that's around. But then obviously the rest of the military environment would be wearing a good sized Kevlar helmet, the Virtus helmet. So it would be interesting to see how that could be mounted within there, because I think the performance of your soldiers, not only on a construction type world, but also when they are in highly stressful situations in urban environments, subterranean environments, whether that's fighting or patrolling or whatever it might be, just operating in a hazardous environment, is something that you don't want to have people who are overly stressed doing.
Absolutely.
Because then they become not only potentially a risk to themselves, but also a risk to everybody else around them, because they're no longer effective in their role. So that's fascinating, and I would really like to have a look at trialing both sets of technology, both Will and Matt, because I think they're both really interesting to a military perspective, not just on the construction side, but also on on the military side as well. So throwing this open to the team out there, Scotty or John, Smurf, have you got anything that you would like to ask the guys? Deathly silence.
Deathly silence. I was just in terms of the working, living, fighting underground. One thing which
yes
struck me was that we know that air quality has a huge impact on the brain very, very, very quickly, as does temperature, actually, so heat or cold. So that, I just thought I'd flag that. Also, if you're living underground, I think that how it messes with your circadian rhythms would be particularly interesting to look at. I can just see a whole, I mean, in terms of stress on the body and the brain, there are very few environments, if you're living, working, fighting underground, that's, and I can't imagine a huge amount of research has been done, like from a construction point of view, tunneling, obviously. There's been research done on the impact of working in confined spaces, but really interesting use case.
I think our mining industry, that's Sandy is our expert in mining and underground. I think they've probably done quite a bit of research in that world, but probably not quite as I don't know whether they're quite as high tech as you are yet. That's quite an interesting angle, perhaps, for us to have a look at. But I think when we go to the kind of the underground challenge later on in the year, I think later on in next year, it will be interesting to, whilst we're doing the setup and running the trial and then doing some sort of working underground in that environment, it would be really interesting to wear the various technologies and see how that, the light cycles and the oxygen and the temperature and the confined space and the noise, the echoing type spaces that we might occupy. It would be really interesting to work out how that might affect not only our productivity but also our our mental state, the brain fitness in that environment. So I think that'd be really, really cool. Got a question coming from John.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks both Matt and Will for very stimulating presentations. Yeah, wow, blown away really. I've probably got lots of questions if I go away and think about this, but the one that's burning away in my mind, and I think Ian kind of touched on it a little bit, Will, when he asked you, how did you overcome getting people to use it really? So it's the consent issue for me, isn't it? You know, whether it's the military or any organization, how do you convince that person to say, let me use your data and then use it against you to tell you if you're good or bad, basically? But question for both, really, because I suppose it's applicable.
I think you're on mute.
Yeah. So firstly, sorry, you have to have a compelling offer. You genuinely it has to be good for that individual, and you can wrap it up in however you want it. But if it's not good for that individual, then you'll never win. Once you have that good offering, then you have to communicate it. And the problem that we fell into, so we were working in dry lining and concrete formwork, and the visa, so the immigration policy the government has for these trades is open, so that these trades are the majority of these trades are manned by Eastern Europeans, and we found that 50% of these guys wouldn't have English was not their mother tongue for all of them, and 50% of them their English level wasn't good enough. So us briefing them, us telling them, and on top of that, they come from places where they have low trust in their government, or lower than we do. And that is a disadvantage from the beginning. So anybody in a position of authority asking you to do something a little bit different, they're going to be very, very skeptical. And so we did a lot of surveys within the construction industry. We would even go onto the street and just talk to people. And we got about 75% of people said they would wear a wearable device if there was something beneficial for them. And we thought that was good enough. That number is a lot lower in people where English is not their mother tongue. But the overwhelming sort of position on that is communication. Once they actually understood what we're offering and we're not out to get them, and this is the way we protect their privacy, then it works. But it's a long road to get there.
Yeah, we found not dissimilar. We'd always assumed that our biggest challenge, even more than the technical side of things, was going to be end user resistance. Just that assumption that they've been tracked, they've been monitored, that the data is going to be used and abused by their employer. But in fact, what we've found almost from day one, as soon as we started talking to those end users, to those workers, they want to be kept safe. So they've seen some pretty nasty stuff in many instances, and want to be kept safe, and generally feel, I have to say, in many sectors, construction in particular, that businesses aren't doing enough. That they feel that stress, that pressure to deliver. Like that stereotype of, oh, I've always done it this way, it's fine. Is true to a degree, but it's perpetuated by the demands and the pressures that are placed from, I mean, all the way up to the client. Like, the client doesn't really think about the effect on the guys on the ground when they say, I need it done by this time next week, and you haven't got any more budget. That there's no real thought, there's no connection. So we found that our biggest ambassadors actually are the end users. And more recently, actually, now we're kind of into sales mode a wee bit. Again, we'd always thought that we should go for the biggest businesses, the tier one contractors in construction, for example. And with there's huge amounts of interest there. It's great, but they move quite slowly, whereas actually SMEs move faster, and we're seeing just as much appetite down in those smaller businesses as well. So it's been very, very encouraging on both fronts.
It's nice to hear that there is a positive appetite for change. Having been in the innovations world for construction for best part of 20 years, some of the attitudes you get are pretty horrible,
Yeah.
especially attitudes to change or just to something new, some innovation, where they'd rather just keep doing things the same old ways. So we're reaching towards the end here. So in fact, we're a little bit over. So Will, there was something you've got your
Just very quickly, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Initially, I said don't have experience on subterranean work and what have you, but I do have experience on sat diving and offshore diving, which, of course, we're talking about circadian rhythms. When you've got a team in sat for 30 days, and they're going from the chamber to the bell to the seabed. North Sea or wherever it is, very, very similar challenges are posed, I think, and you have a huge amount of technology around 3 individuals who are doing this work, and so the sort of the consequences of them getting it wrong or them to be either low productivity or be incapacitated is huge. So I think there's a lot of, I mean, I'm only sort of thinking out loud here, but there's a lot of parallels that could be drawn there.
Yeah. Brilliant. Stuart, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks very much. That was fantastic. I'd just like to reserve a spot at the community day, Matt, for you. Maybe not this one, but maybe the next one, because I think that's progressed quite a lot from the first time I saw it. And I know we're engaged through the Commit to Wellbeing project, but fascinating, and thanks. Great to see. Will, can't wait to see it next week. I'm sure there'll be a lot more questions from the commit audience.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
fantastic.
that was fantastic. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to have to draw the session to a close. So thank you very much once again, Matt and Will, for some really interesting presentations and some awesome tech. I'm certainly going to follow this up, and the presentations and the recording will be up on the Defence Connect. And as I think, because we've not spoken anything specifically military or with any sort of classification today, perhaps we can share this with the commit team and try and generate a little bit more wider interest outside of the commit world or the Reserves Innovation Working Group world. So without further ado, thank you very much, one and all. Just a quick, is there anything else that anybody has a burning desire to ask or say?
Yeah, just me, Ian. Hi, yeah. I've worked for companies the size of Balfour Beatty Costain. I now work for an SME company in South Wales. What companies have you spoken to? Because it sounds incredibly interesting what both of you are dealing with. And I've come from sites where I speak to people and I go, oh, we killed 4 people in one day, and they can actually name the site I actually worked on. So I've come from places where you've had some real bad accidents, and it's never a nice place to be. So how far have you stepped it down? Like I say, if I gave you the name of my company, I work for a company called Knights Brown, whose head office is in Ringwood in Hampshire. And the guy who's our safety guy, he's an ex-Royal Engineer, so he would love this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we've spoken to you guys yet, Scott, but we've certainly. So in fact, we've just started a trial down in Essex with it's just a groundworks company of it's like 10 people. That's the size. Well, it's the size of the company. Never mind the size of the trial. So yeah, we somewhat surprisingly, it's not where we thought we would go this soon. Is right down to the SME and even micro business level.
It certainly is, as you alluded to. I joined Knights Brown in May this year. When I joined, I was the only reservist in their whole business. There's now 2 reservists in their business. A week after we joined, they had a reserve policy because the HR woman just went to see the MD and said, I think we should have a reserve policy for these 2 guys. And he went, do it. A week later, we had a reserve policy that gave us all our entitlement for days off, paid leave, and all that. Jesus, cost things that would have had to go through a committee of people, and you'd have been months about it, and it would probably end up stalling because they were going, oh yeah, there's only 2 people and 20,000, so why should we give them a policy? But yeah, it's very interesting. So I don't know how we would contact you or how you contact us, but I'm sure if I spoke to our safety guy, he would be very interested in either hearing much more from you or seeing if we can get involved in somehow as a company.
Great, happy to connect, as I'm sure Will is after this. I don't know if Ian can pass on emails.
Ian.
I'll facilitate that. No worries at all. We'll make sure that your details are passed on, and you get a connection with Scotty. No worries at all.
Yeah, no problem. I'll send this because this PowerPoint will be on the back of that, won't it, Ian?
Yeah.
So even if I send that to him and say, look, whilst you run in it, have a look at the PowerPoint, and then we can try and hopefully ramp them up between the 2 or 3 organisations.
Cool.
That'd be brilliant.
Yeah, amazing.
Superb. Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, one and all. Thank you once again to Will and Matt for coming in and presenting, and also thank you very much, Stuart, for facilitating that and making it happen for me at very, very short notice. So thanks all, one and all. Have a great time, and we will see you back here in a couple of weeks' time for the underground living presentation for then. Brilliant. Okay. Thanks all.
Everyone.
Take care.
Nice to meet you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.